Child marriage in Islam. Why did I make this video? I was approached by hundreds of people who had questions about various aspects of Islam and its founder Muhammad. While this faith had its share of controversies in the recent years, it is still demonized by many, and understood by even fewer, and in particular, Muhammad's personal lifestyle have repeatedly been attacked. So after receiving a lot of requests on social media from people who wanted to know the truth about Islamic teachings and the personal life of Prophet Muhammad, I decided to conduct independent research and gathered information from renowned scholars to find out the actual events in the light of modern and ancient history. As much as many of us want to avoid religious topics and theological discussions, as it understandably pushes some out of their comfort zones, misunderstanding others' faith and religion often causes bitter dissent and even violent brawls to outright war. It is no secret that the Crusades was a dark stain on the Christian history of Europe, and many people were quick to blame Christianity for inciting violence, as in this century, the same is often said about Islam. Men and women with shallow knowledge of religious scriptures and laws often rush to draw conclusions after reading unverified texts and passages taken out of context. For instance, churchgoers sometimes hear biblical verses that advise fornicators to be put to death. The passages in the Bible which appear to glorify killing and quote Jesus to be promoting slavery, or the Old Testament verse that commands people to stone women who commit fornication, are often taken out of context in order to depict Judaism and Christianity in a negative way. The same is also done with Islam, and as such, some distorted images are publicized in the media under the guise of objective reporting. It is possible the mention of slavery in the Bible is not meant in literal form. Or perhaps stoning women for adultery was merely suggested in the laws of Moses and may not have been strictly commanded. What purpose does religion serve? All men and women are creation of one God, and regardless of religion, race or culture, religion serves to increase affection, love and kindness among us. Religions offer a way to expand on the idea of brotherhood and friendship, and Islam, like the other monotheistic religions like Judaism and Christianity, call upon people to worship the God of Abraham and live peacefully with one another. However, this message of love and peace is often distorted by some who run misinformation campaign and propaganda online that can confuse the honest seeker of knowledge and facts. It is necessary sometimes to address the facts so that people of various backgrounds can judge for themselves what the truth is, rather than being misled into believing in some false propaganda and be coaxed to hate certain religion, sect or race. Despising others blindly can serve no purpose except augment one's own unhappiness. It is up to us to use religion as a means to expand the unification of humankind and spread kindness and love to every man, woman and children. All of us are in the eyes of the one God, who does not discriminate between any religion, race or gender. I elected to make this video mostly to post historical facts accurately and to put an end to the misinformation that plagues the media, particularly about Muhammad's marriage. This persistent misinformation is dangerous because it turns one man against another, makes one race hate another, brews anger and eventually leads nations across the world into harsh warfare. Islam is the most misinterpreted religion in the world, particularly because of historical inaccuracies that had been spreading for a long time. Arabs in pre-Islamic Arabia would often spread false information about Muhammad and his followers, and some of those stories inadvertently ended up becoming parts of religious booklets, and those false accounts were even adopted by some Muslim scholars who thought those to be authentic prophetic narrations. Hence, in order to understand the Islamic religion, it is necessary to study only the Quran, as this has never been altered in any way. Unfortunately, since many of the followers of Islam also believe in the false propaganda, I made this video after considerable discussions with archaeologists and historians as well as Muslim scholars who pointed out to me the numerous inconsistencies in many theological books. I aim to discuss an aspect of Islam that has been grossly misunderstood, and that is marriage of the Prophet to a young woman named Aisha. Recent media attention on the idea of sex slavery raised many questions about this subject. Is child marriage legal in Islam? What did Muslim Prophet Muhammad have to say on the topic of marriage? Few people concern themselves with approaching the religious texts with an open mind or studying the holy books objectively, but content themselves with their own, often biased, interpretation of the faith. In this brief video we will attempt to go over a few of the most controversial and least understood topics in Islam. Did Muhammad marry Aisha when she was only 6 years old? Writing about Islam's Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, the Orientalist scholar W. Montgomery Watt wrote, "Of all the world's great men, none has been so much maligned as Muhammad." Critics allege that Aisha was just 6 years old when she was betrothed to Muhammad, and only 9 when the marriage was consummated. They base this on a saying attributed to Aisha herself, Sahih Bukhari Volume 5, Book 58. Of all the accusations laid against Muhammad, his critics love to accuse him of pedophilia. They say that Prophet Muhammad was a pedophile or a child molester because he married a young girl. This accusation is made to delegitimize the authority of Prophet Muhammad as a moral and spiritual guide. So Islam bashers and Muslim haters have a field day when they play the pedophilia card in a debate. In the 7th century era, adulthood was defined as the onset of puberty. This much is true and was also the case in Europe, 5 centuries after Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. 33-year-old King John of England married 12-year-old Isabella of Angoulême. Interestingly, of the many criticisms of Muhammad made at the time by his opponents, none focused on Aisha's age at marriage. Other notable instances of child marriages in history are the following. Let us see what the founder of Western Christian theology, now considered a saint, practiced upon. Augustine was sexlessly betrothed to a 10-year-old girl who was pleasing unto him, until he elected to lead an ascetic lifestyle for religious reasons. Augustine writes in his Confessions, Book 6, Chapter 13. The Roman tradition served as the base for Christian Europe as well as the Christian Church itself, which generally, essentially based upon biological development, set it at 12 or 14 but continued to set the absolute minimum at 7. Journal of Psychology and Human Sexuality. Vern L. Buller, Professor State of New York University, History and Sociology Emeritus, SUNY College, Buffalo. According to the Judeo-Christian tradition, Prophet Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, Rivkah, who was only 3 years old at the time. However, Islamic scholars refute this claim and say Islamic ally marriage is not legal before the age of 16, as that is when puberty is often experienced. At 16, Islam considers a man or a woman to be an adult who is old enough to get married, inherit or give testimony in court. Sri Saroda Devi was born in 1853. At the age of 5 she was betrothed to Sri Ramakrishnan, 19th century Hindu mystic and saint. Saint Hedwig of Silesia at the age of 12 married Henry I. Mary Stuart married Henry VIII when she was only 6. Mary Hathaway was only 9 when she was married to William Williams. Marchioness Barbara of Brandenburg-Ansbach was 8 years old when she was married to Duke Heinrich IX. Margaret I, Queen of Denmark, in 1359 as a 6-year-old was engaged to the 18-year-old King Haakon VI of Norway. Mary Stuart, Princess Royal, and Willem II married the Prince of Orange and Stadtholder of Holland. She was only 9 when they married. Maria Adelaide married Louis, Duke of Burgundy by proxy in 1696 when she was about 10. James Hamilton I, Duke of Hamilton b. June 19, 1606 was almost 16 on his wedding, June 16, 1622, with 9-year-old Mary, Margaret, Fielding. And de Mowbray, 8th Countess of Norfolk, was 6 when she married the 4-year-old Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York. Mary of Serbia married Stephen Tomivi, heir apparent to the throne of Bosnia, when she was 12 years old. Margaret Beaufort, Countess of Richmond and Derby, was married to Suffolk's son, John de la Pole. The wedding was held between the 28th of January and the 7th of February 1444, when she was perhaps a year old, but certainly, more than 3. Princess Urraca of Leon and Castile, born in 1079 r. 1109 to 1126, was a child bride at age 8 when she was married to Raymond of Burgundy. Isabella of Valois was only 6 years old when she married Richard II of England, who was 32 years. Margaret of Bohemia or Luxembourg was married to Louis I of Hungary at the age of 7. Isabella of Hainault, aged 10 at the time of marriage, was the daughter of Baldwin V of Hainault and Margaret I. Joan I of Navarre was aged 10 years old at the time of marriage, and she was the daughter of Henry I of Navarre and Blanche of Artois. Theodora Comnena was aged 13 years old when she was married King Baldwin III of Jerusalem, 1158. Agnes of France was 12 years old when, widowed, she was married to Andronicus Comnenus, Byzantine Emperor, 1182. Saint Elizabeth of Portugal was aged 12 years old when she was married to King Denis of Portugal and gave birth to 3 children shortly thereafter. Katerina Sforza was betrothed aged 9-year-old, she gave birth at age 15. Stephen Milutin, the Král of Serbia, married Simonis, the daughter of Emperor Andronikos II when she was only 5 years old. At the time of the marriage, Stephen Milutin was 50 years old. Age of consent. The age of consent is the age at which a person is considered to be legally competent to consent to sexual acts, and is thus the minimum age of a person with whom another person is legally permitted to engage in sexual activity. Till 1880, and occasionally until early 1900, the age of consent in the following countries were low. In Russia, 10-year-old could legally have sex. In Denmark, 12-year-old could legally have sex. In the United States, it varied. Arkansas, 10-year-old could legally have sex. California, 10-year-old could legally have sex. Colorado, 10-year-old could legally have sex. Delaware, 7-year-old could legally have sex. Florida, 10-year-old could legally have sex. Georgia, 10-year-old could legally have sex. Marriage of Muhammad. So, who was Muhammad? The Islamic religion was founded by a man named Muhammad, who was a shepherd in his youth. Muhammad is arguably one of the most controversial icons of the modern world, not least because there has been little historical research done on his persona. Since he was a young man, Muhammad was known as the most truthful person in Mecca. From before his prophethood, he believed in the God of Abraham and shunned idol worship. He never spoke a lie even as a joke. Muhammad lived by a unique set of morals, and in his entire life, he did not kill one human being even in war when he was attacked and tortured fiercely. So what was Arabia like before Muhammad taught the pagan desert inhabitants to worship the God of Abraham and give up idolatry? Arabia was less than civilized when Muhammad was a young man. Rampant murders, tribal feuds, illicit relationships, indiscriminate slavery and mass plundering was the norm. Even prior to becoming a prophet, Muhammad abhorred such practices and encouraged others to be charitable. Following the advent of his prophethood, Muhammad gave women equal rights in a time when women were nothing but the property of men. Muhammad taught people the covenants of Islam, which gave women the right to buy and sell without hindrance, own businesses and express her views politically. These were all basic rights which the American and European woman was not granted until relatively recently. Muhammad also encouraged women to study and learn Islamic and scientific knowledge, breaking a ban which several religions had stipulated, that forbid women from acquiring any religious knowledge or touch religious texts. It also abolished the practice of marrying a woman without her consent. Thus, many historians suggest that by bringing forth Islam, the Prophet Muhammad was women's first liberator in 6th century Arabia. While many people around the world are misinformed about Muhammad's lifestyle and characteristics, others have given him the due credit for the many changes he brought about. After his prophethood, Muhammad was granted the Quran, a scripture which had never been changed in the last 1400 years. Muslims believe the Quran is undoubtedly from a supreme and spiritual being because the scientific facts that are stated in the Quran are in no way possible for man to have known 14 centuries ago. The Book of Islam, regardless of what subject it refers to, has often been proven as God's word as each new piece of historical, scientific or archaeological information comes to light. Facts about scientific subjects and the news delivered to us about the past and future, facts that no human being could have known at the time of the Quran's revelation, are announced in its verses. It is impossible for this information to have been known with the level of knowledge and technology available in 7th century Arabia. In addition to mentioning the atomic number, every single element, the genetic code of many living organisms, the theory of entropy and a steadily expanding universe, and how each individual's fingertips are absolutely unique, when we have only discovered this fact recently, using modern technology and modern scientific equipment, the Quran includes unique details about black holes, pulsars, the Rosette Nebula, subatomic particles, quantum physics, fossilization and iron content, the layers of Earth, the weight of clouds, the relativity of time, the force of gravity, the orbital movements, the sun's trajectory, the programming in genes, the sun's hydrogen and helium content, or many other facts scientists of our day are only just beginning to discover. In chapter 4 of the Quran, God informs people, if it, the Quran, had been from other than Allah, they would have found many inconsistencies in it. Q1 verse 82 of chapter 4, this verse was meant to highlight that Muhammad, who was an ordinary human, couldn't have known those scientific facts back then which only modern science is being able to prove now. Muhammad loved animals and was especially fond of both cats and dogs. He entreated the Bedouin Arabs to treat their camels gently. Dogs were also considered to be valued creations of God and held a very high position in the Quran, as is mentioned in chapter Kahf. Muhammad opposed animal cruelty and severely reprimanded cattle owners who mistreated their herds. He never ordered to kill a single dog or cat in his entire lifetime. However, due to widespread disease and other illness, the Prophet had at certain times advised Muslims to keep a safe distance away from dogs that were ill, in order to safeguard young children from getting bitten or attacked. Despite his idealized vision for peace and stability, the pagan Arabs of Mecca were outraged by his demands. Muhammad was tortured mercilessly by pagans when he began to preach the teachings of Islam, but he never retaliated and was eventually forced to flee to nearby city of Medina. When Prophet Muhammad took over Mecca a decade later, he never took revenge against any one of his former oppressors. Muhammad continued preaching Islam to those vanquished Meccans and offered them utmost mercy and freedom, which included granting liberty especially to women and slaves, who were oppressed mercilessly by the pagan Romans and the French. Women in those societies neither had the right to inherit nor had the right to marry on her own, or buy or sell or own any property at the pre-Islamic period. Muhammad therefore announced that women and men had equal position in the eyes of God, and he gave them the right to inherit, buy, sell, and marry on their own. Attempt to introduce greater sexual equality to religion did not produce great results in the past, partially because some men hijacked the faith and dragged it back to the old patriarchy. This happened in both Christianity and Islam, latter-day reassertions of axial age monotheism. The Prophet Muhammad, for example, was anxious to emancipate women, and they were among his first converts. In 7th century Arabia, the Quran taught people that men and women had exactly the same responsibilities and duties and gave women rights of inheritance and divorce that we would not enjoy in the West until the 19th century. Muhammad's inherent desire to instill civil behavior into his countrymen drove him to the streets. For days he would traverse the desert hills and entreat his fellow Arabs to enjoin kindness and equality. He urged them to free their slaves and deal mercifully with women and children. Muhammad encouraged the wealthy Arab merchants to give charity to the poor and orphans. But the pagan Arabs were infuriated by his claims that women and men should enjoy equal rights. This caused them to torture and persecute him endlessly. One of his staunch persecutors was his own uncle and his cousin. For 3 years his fellow Meccans and other dominant tribes levied a ban on trade with Muhammad's family and followers and subjected them to near-famine conditions. In this sanction Muhammad's wife and uncle both died, but Muhammad survived the ordeal. The pagan leaders of Mecca then attempted to assassinate Muhammad, but he fled Mecca at nightfall and escaped to the city of Medina. Why were the people who call themselves Arab today torturing and killing Muhammad and his family 14 centuries ago? It was because he enjoined others to do acts of charity and free their slaves and respect the womenfolk. His crime was he wanted to give women more rights than men. He banned murder and called for an end to tribal feuds, in which wealthy families got away by killing poor or less distinguished people. They resented the fact that he abolished slavery and stipulated that prisoners of war could be taken in the aftermath of a combat but must be freed upon the payment of ransom. He would remain in near-starvation rations to ensure the prisoners of war were fed adequately. The endless persecution became unbearable for Muhammad and his followers. And only after a Christian king in Africa offered him and the Muslims shelter in his country did the believers get some respite for a few days. So how old was Aisha when the Prophet married her? According to the Arab historians, Aisha was 19 at the time of her marriage to the Prophet. She had been engaged to him from the age of 16. Then why do people say she was 6 or 9 years old? Some people have cited a hadith, or an alleged saying of the Prophet, which was narrated by a senile deaf storyteller who misheard Aisha. This chain of narration comes from an old man who allegedly heard it from his father, who claimed to have heard from his step-aunt, but because it is a weak narration, most Islamic scholars are certain that it was inaccurate. A tradition in Islam is not considered authentic until or unless it was heard and reported by at least 8 to 10 persons. When Aisha was telling onlookers that she was 16, he misheard it and thought she said 6. The same mistake happened when Aisha said she was 19 at betrothal. Again, the man said he had heard her saying she was 9. The most important source in Islam is the Quran, because it was never altered and nothing was added or omitted from it. As for the hadith parables of the Prophet, they are so much less reliable. This hadith that talks about Aisha being 6 or 9 years old are simply fabricated lie. Sahih Bukhari is not verbatim word of God like Al-Quran. We can prove Aisha's actual age by studying historical source, not heresy. Sources which says she was 9 are narrated by senile men like Hisham ibn Urwa and are unreliable. He was old and deaf. He misheard, misquoted. There were lots of people who used to invent lie against the messenger while he was alive, so it is not unusual they would do it 250 years after his death. Some people claim Imam Bukhari must have compiled only authentic narrations, so it must be true if he has narrated the hadith. But we have to remember that Imam Bukhari rejected 99% of what he collected and called it pure lies and fabrication and accepted only 1%. Was he infallible like the messengers? No. Was he divinely guided by Allah in his work? No. To assume everything he wrote to be the truth is foolish. First, Muhammad's wife Aisha was the daughter of Abu Bakr. Tabari reported that all 4 of Abu Bakr's children were born during the pre-Islamic period, that is the pre-610 AD. Aisha's marriage to Prophet Muhammad took place 1 year after Hijra, or emigration to Medina, or around 624 AD. Therefore, even if Aisha had been born as late as 609 AD, only a year before Prophet Muhammad claimed prophethood, she would have been roughly 14 at the time of emigration to Medina in 623 and therefore no less than 15 at the time of her marriage to Prophet Muhammad. This is a far cry from the age of 6 or 9 that critics assert. In addition, some modern Muslim scholars have more recently cast doubt on the veracity of the saying, or hadith, used to assert Aisha's young age. In Islam, the hadith literature, sayings of the Prophet, is considered secondary to the Quran. While the Quran is considered to be the verbatim word of God, the hadiths were transmitted over time through a rigorous but not infallible methodology. Taking all known accounts and records of Aisha's age at marriage, estimates of her age range from 16 to 19. The Islamophobic depiction of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha as motivated by misplaced desire fits within a broader Orientalist depiction of Muhammad as a philanderer. This idea dates back to the Crusades. According to the academic Keisha Ali, accusations of lust and sensuality were a regular feature of medieval attacks on the Prophet's character and, by extension, on the authenticity of Islam. There is consensus that Aisha was 10 years younger than her elder sister Asma, whose age at the time of the Hijra, or migration to Medina, was about 28. It can be concluded that Aisha was about 18 years old at migration. On her moving to the Prophet's house, she was a young woman at 21. Hisham, the man who claimed Aisha was 9 years old, is the single narrator of the hadith whose authenticity is challenged, for it does not correlate with the many historical facts of the time. A stateswoman, scholar, mufti, and judge, Aisha combined spirituality, activism, and knowledge and remains a role model for many Muslim women today. The gulf between her true legacy and her depiction in Islamophobic materials is not merely historically inaccurate, it is an insult to the memory of a pioneering woman. However, Islam offered people a plethora of resources to investigate from. Women are highly respected in Islam, and treating them with respect has been made incumbent on all men. Before Islam, women were considered shameful, female children were buried alive, prostitution was rampant, divorce was only in the hands of the husband, inheritance was only for the strong, and oppression was widespread. Islam came and abolished these practices. Even now in developed countries, women are not always granted due respect, dignity, and honor, let alone equal pay for equal work. Islam, however, regards women as precious and valuable, not to be disrespected or disgraced. The mistreatment of women in some Middle Eastern countries or Muslim families is due to cultural factors that some Muslims wrongly follow, not because of Islam. Why would many women around the world willingly enter Islam if it is an oppressive religion? One of the questions that arises often is, where did this religion come from? Islam is a monotheistic religion that calls on believers to worship the Lord of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Muslims believe that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the national God of the Israelites who delivered the Israelites from slavery in Egypt is also the God of Muhammad. While Judaism often refers to this one God as Eloah, Muslims have over 99 names for God, including Ilah and Allah. The same God who granted Jews the law of Moses at biblical Mount Sinai and revealed Torah to Prophet Moses and the New Testament to Prophet Jesus is the one God who revealed the Final Testament, or the Quran, to Muhammad, who Muslims consider to be last of all the prophets. Islam as the final revealed religion therefore brings forth a complete way of life that had been exemplified in the life of Prophet Muhammad, who spent his final years exhorting people to do good and shun all evil practices like slavery, adultery, burglary, and bloodshed.